Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the European Commission's daily midday briefing on this 24th of September 2012. We have no press events for you here today, but for tomorrow I would like to draw your attention to the fact that at the beginning of our midday briefing tomorrow, Commissioner Cholas will be with us and he will be making a statement on our new proposals on transparency of the common agricultural policy. These proposals have been developed to find a balance between the need for transparency regarding the beneficiaries of the common agricultural policy and the respect for personal data. So tomorrow, that's the subject that Commissioner Cholas will be talking to you about at this time. But for now, the floor is yours for any questions you would like to ask. Don't speak all at once. I think there is a question there.
I have Poppy Bullock from MLX. I have a question for Isaac. Is he going to be here?
Going to be here, yes. So if you just wait a couple of seconds, then Isaac will be around, and otherwise colleagues will certainly try to make sure that he gets here if he's held up by something. Let's see if there are other questions in the meantime. Peter.
I don't see Simon either, but maybe Olivier. I just have a sort of a planning type question. The Spanish government has announced that they are going to give us the details of their bottom-up review of banks on Friday. That has always been seen as the preliminary towards the Eurogroup deciding how much Spain will need from the ESM as part of its bank recapitalization. Do you have a timeline onto when that decision is likely made? Is it immediately after Spain on Friday gives its numbers, or do we not know yet when that meeting will occur, when that decision is going to be taken? Thanks.
Good afternoon, Peter. Well, as regard the timeline for the implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding on the banking sector for Spain, there are clear deadlines, not maybe as clear as the one you are now referring to, but it is true that we have a first deadline this Friday to get the bank-by-bank assessment and stress test on the Spanish banking sector. Then it is clear that the Commission will give its assessment in October, according to the Memorandum of Understanding, and that the first disbursement will be done in November. There are to my knowledge, no specific timeline between this week and the end of October, but this, of course, should be done in this frame of time.
Okay, thank you, Olivier. Other questions for Olivier in his capacity as replacing Simon before we let him off the podium and get back to the question for Isaac, who is now here? Okay, so let's have the question for Isaac, please.
Thank you. It's in relation to the support shown from the US Senate over the weekend to the bill opposing the European Emissions Trading Scheme and the inclusion of aviation, as I'm sure you're very aware, Isaac. I'd like to know, how does this change the situation? What does this add to the discussion on the inclusion of aviation in the ETS? What's the significance of it, and what's the response from the Commission? Thank you.
Thanks, Poppy. Sorry I was late. What does it change? Nothing from our stand. Of course, we will keep repeating what we have said before since the whole debate started. If we look back a little bit on last year when the whole debate kicked off in the press, we have been always saying the same thing. A global deal means the EU modifying its legislation. And our partners know that very well, and they have been calling also for the suspension of the inclusion of aviation into the EU ETS and a delay of the implementation system, We have repeatedly said that until we don't see this global agreement in place, we will not do it. So since we started this debate, where is this global agreement? It's been more than 2 years already, and we've been fighting for this global agreement since even before the legislation started. So my first initial reaction to this this project of legislation, because as you know, it's not a final bill, is that I regret that the Senate has adopted this bill, and I expect that the American authorities and the government focus their efforts on getting this global agreement done as soon as possible. I hope that they see the urgency on reducing emissions and avoid escalation of conflict. And we basically really hope that this can be done this year. And there is a positive element, Poppy, in this Thune bill. The positive element is that the bill calls for the U.S. administration to negotiate and conclude as soon as possible a global deal on aviation. Good. This is what we always wanted. We agree. But it's not enough to say that you have to. And you want this global deal. You have to work for it. You have to work very hard to get it done. And this is where we are waiting from our U.S. partners at ICAO. We are waiting for a change in the way they approach this, and a change in the way they put the urgency into this matter.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Isaac or anybody else? I think we should change the subject then. Go ahead.
Merci Pia. Je crois que c'est toujours pour Olivier, parce que s'il n'y a pas Simon, c'est toujours une question sur ça. Pensez que ça concerne les ressources du ESM. Il y a une hypothèse, ou si vous êtes en train de penser que ces ressources pourraient être pas suffisantes. Merci.
Qui me parle? Bonjour Giovanna. Il y a effectivement des discussions en cours sur la possibilité d'utiliser deux instruments financiers qui ont été ajoutés au EFSF l'année dernière, à l'automne dernier, et je pense que tout le monde s'en souviendra ici, les discussions qui ont eu lieu entre les États membres et la Commission, puisque nous sommes dans une phase de transition entre le EFSF et l'ESM. Les États membres et nous-mêmes discutons la possibilité d'utiliser ces deux instruments financiers qui sont aujourd'hui attachés au EFSF, de les attacher à l'ESM. Ces discussions sont en cours et à ce stade, je n'ai pas d'autres informations à te donner, mais pour te donner quand même un petit peu plus, ce sont des discussions techniques qui sont vraiment normales et font partie de, je dirais, de ce transfert et de cette transition entre les deux instruments, EFSF et ESM. Et donc, nous sommes en train de voir, point par point, tout ce qui peut être transféré de l'un à l'autre. Voilà un exemple de choses que nous sommes en train de discuter.
Merci Olivier. D'autres questions? Oui, Jean-Jacques.
Oui, pour Olivier, est-ce que tu peux nous rappeler quels sont ces deux instruments financiers, à quelle hauteur ils étaient dotés, s'il y avait une dotation à l'intérieur du FESF?
Je peux te rappeler effectivement ces deux instruments. Il s'agit en anglais the first one is a partial protection certificate and the second one is a co-investment fund. Mes collègues du EFSF avec qui nous étions en contact ce matin sont à la disposition de tous les journalistes qui voudraient rafraîchir leur mémoire et leur fiche sur ces deux instruments, comment ils fonctionnent, la hauteur de leur capital et les discussions en cours. Donc, je me permets de passer le message et de vous renvoyer vers les porte-paroles qui suivent ces questions de manière plus précise que moi.
Merci beaucoup, Olivier. Encore une question peut-être pour toi? Oui, Stéphanie.
The Portuguese government will, it looks like, will renegotiate certain targets. Could this mean that the targets agreed with the Troika could be at risk? And also, would you comment on the fact that this is actually the first time that, due to protests, a government reacts by changing the agenda?
Well, we are aware of the consultation with the social partners on possible new measures to eventually replace some of those agreed with the Troika. It doesn't change the target, and it doesn't change the agreement, the overall agreement. It is for the Portuguese authorities to decide on measures that could substantiate both in figures and in quality, I insist on both in figures and in quality, the agreed fiscal adjustment path as recently revised or extended during the staff mission of the Troika. Of course, we will address diligently any new measures put forward by the Portuguese government. But I have no further comments to make at this stage, as we are waiting for the result of these consultations in Lisbon.
Indeed, we are waiting, Isabel, but you had a question on the same subject.
When exactly are you expecting the Portuguese government to announce and to present you the new measures? Is there a timeline for that?
Well, we expect to get that as soon as possible. Of course, the Portuguese authorities are well aware of their financial needs, and of course the necessity to conclude as soon as possible to have the Eurogroup agreed on the next disbursement.
And follow up?
Can you just specify, does the government have to present the measures before the next meeting of the Eurogroup, or can it all be discussed afterwards?
For them to decide, but we would expect these measures to be put forward as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Olivier. Other questions on other subjects? Oliver Grimm, and then back to Jean-Jacques.
Yeah, it's a question on Belarus, or a couple of questions on Belarus, and I guess it would be, Maya is there. It's kind of a wider question on the EU sanction policy. Has there ever been a systematic assessment done by the EAS or the Commission about the effect the sanctions, particularly in Belarus, are having on the regime and the people working for it? Do you have an overview of how many bank accounts, for example, in European countries have been frozen of these people on the list? How many other assets have been frozen or seized? And in addition with that, people who know more about Belarus than I do say that the only way to really squeeze Lukashenko and the regime would be to also sanction oil imports in the EU, but it's particularly the Baltic states who are opposing this because they're so dependent on this energy source. Do you have a position on this? Do you have a view on this? Do you see any movement in that direction? Thank you.
Oliver, as you know, the Foreign Affairs Council is scheduled to have a broader debate on Belarus next month in October, when the current sanctions will come under the review. This review is something that we do on a regular basis to make sure that we really target those who are responsible, in the case of Belarus, who are responsible for the ongoing repression, and those who are financing this ongoing repression. As always, all the measures are adopted by unanimity. As I said, on the 15th of October, the foreign ministers will revert to the debate on Belarus, where they will take into account the most recent developments. You're aware of the diplomatic crisis from August, the elections over this weekend, the continuing repression, the political prisoners that we have called on to be released on numerous occasions still not being released. So I think you will have to wait until then to see what the decisions of the Council will be. In terms of the implementation of the sanctions, this is in the hands of the member states. We, of course, believe that the sanctions policy is a useful tool to put on the pressure of those who are responsible for the repression and for financing of the elite that is responsible for this. And we are using it to the extent to put pressure on the authorities to release the political prisoners and to reverse the current ongoing practices.
A follow-up?
Sorry, if I may add a question on a neighboring country of Belarus, and well, it's not a related case, but a similar case. The Magnitsky case, there seems to be some movement in the European Parliament. The Parliament wants Council to come up with sanctions against those people who were responsible or complicit in the murder of the Lower Magnitsky in a Russian prison. Of course, the Council is the addressee of this resolution, but does Baroness Ashton, does the EEAS have a position on this? Would this be useful? Would this be helpful for the relationship between the EU and Russia? Do you think this would be a way of fostering the rule of law in Russia, or do you think it would be rather something that would throw some clouds on the relationship with Russia? Thanks. So, sorry for these couple of questions, but this is open for us. Thank you.
Oliver, I'm not going to speculate on what kind of possible developments in the Magnitsky case would have on the overall EU-Russia relationship. What I can tell you is that we follow this case very closely and have been urging consistently the Russian authorities to ensure a due judicial process. There has been a series of steps. For example, President Van Rompuy sent a letter this spring to, at that time, President Medvedev, and the case has been as such well documented and has received significant input from different sides. We have seen certain steps, but still very limited steps so far, and what we are currently urging the Russian authorities is to close the posthumous prosecution and to bring the case of Mr. Magnitsky's death in pretrial detention to a credible and thorough conclusion as soon as possible. We believe that this will send a strong signal on the state of the rule of law in Russia, and would show the respect for his family and for those who fight corruption in the country. And this is where we are at the moment. I can't really speculate on what the next steps will be.
Last follow-up, Oliver?
Yeah, sorry, really my last one on this one. You're aware that this investment fund Hermitage that Mr. Magnitsky used to work for asked public prosecutors, I think in 6 EU member states, to seize bank accounts that apparently were used, according to these allegations, for some money laundering organized by Russian public officials and so forth, who were also complicit in the whole Magnitsky case. Do you have any reaction to that? How does that play into your considerations of this case? Does it give new urgency to it, or just taking notes of it? Thank you.
As I said, we're following this very closely and are in touch with various sides. But I also stated our position, and this is where we stand at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Jean-Jacques, peut-être sur tout à fait autre chose.
Une question sur le semestre budgétaire. J'aimerais bien voir Olivier remonter derrière son joli petit lutrin zébré.
Il arrive. Je t'en prie.
Ça concerne l'objectif 3% en 2013. Jusqu'à présent, les voix ont été assez rares pour dire qu'il faudrait repousser, sauf dans le cas de l'Espagne, qu'il a obtenu d'ailleurs. Et hier, de façon assez intéressante, la France, par la voix du président de son Assemblée nationale, un socialiste dont on imagine qu'il ne pense pas le contraire du président ou du gouvernement, a dit que la Commission devrait réfléchir à repousser cet objectif 3% pour la raison suivante, le manque de croissance. Donc je voudrais savoir, si le manque de croissance ou l'absence de croissance rentre dans les circonstances exceptionnelles qui permettraient de repousser l'objectif. 2, ce que vous en pensez sur le principe pour tous les pays de l'UE. Et 3, ce que vous en pensez à propos de la France.
Merci Jean-Jacques. Nous avons effectivement vu cette déclaration et tu nous donnes l'occasion peut-être effectivement de clarifier à la fois notre position et les termes du débat. Tout d'abord, la Commission ne voit pas de raison de changer l'approche actuelle en matière de politique budgétaire en ce qui concerne la France. Et nous avons eu des assurances, à la fois publiques mais aussi en bilatéral, depuis plusieurs mois et encore la semaine dernière au niveau du président et du Premier ministre Hérault, de l'engagement des autorités françaises à respecter le déficit de 3% l'année prochaine. Nos interlocuteurs en la matière, les interlocuteurs du président Barroso et du vice-président Rehn, sont le chef de l'État, le Premier ministre et le ministre des Finances. Nous nous en tiendrons à leurs commentaires et à l'engagement qu'ils donnent au nom de la France. S'agissant des comparaisons que tu fais avec le cas de l'Espagne ou d'autres pays, je dois rappeler que nous sommes dans le cadre du semestre européen, puisque tu te réfères à cet exercice, nous sommes engagés à faire une analyse pays par pays de la situation à la fois des déficits publics, de la dette, de l'inflation, des taux de croissance et des réformes structurelles nécessaires. Nous sommes donc engagés dans un processus où nous regardons la situation pays par pays et nous prenons des décisions, ou plutôt nous proposons aux États membres de prendre des décisions conformément à ce que nous estimons le mieux pour ce pays-là. Il est donc pour nous vain de comparer la France avec l'Espagne, l'Espagne avec l'Italie ou l'Italie avec la Grèce, etc. Nous examinons la situation des pays au cas par cas. S'agissant des perspectives de croissance ou du manque de croissance dans certains pays, nous mettrons à jour nos prévisions économiques des 27 États membres de l'Union européenne et de la zone euro le 7 novembre prochain. D'ici là, je ne rentrerai pas dans des discussions spéculatives ou dans des scénarios, puisque les uns et les autres donnent leurs chiffres. Les nôtres seront donnés le 7 novembre, et c'est sur cette base-là que nous examinerons les projets de budget des États membres.
Merci. Un follow-up, Jean-Jacques.
Oui, sur l'aspect non spéculatif, comme tu dirais, de ma question, est-ce que l'absence de croissance ou la faiblesse de croissance est considérée comme faisant partie des guillemets circonstances exceptionnelles, fermez les guillemets, qui permettraient de s'exonérer du respect de l'objectif en 2013 ?
Le pacte de croissance, le pacte de stabilité et de croissance a effectivement des clauses qui permettent d'examiner des circonstances exceptionnelles au cas par cas. Il n'y a pas une liste détaillée de ces clauses exceptionnelles pour permettre justement à la Commission de faire l'analyse appropriée et aux États membres de prendre la décision qu'ils estiment nécessaire en fonction du cas du pays, de sa situation spécifique et du calendrier. On n'en est effectivement pas là. Il s'agit donc quand même d'une question spéculative. Cher Jean-Jacques.
Merci, Olivier. D'autres questions sur d'autres sujets encore? Other questions on other subjects? Oui.
About the clarification on the conversations with President Morsi of Egypt and President Barroso. They both expressed unwavering support for the fundamental rights, and I was wondering, in the light of the events of the weekend where people have been imprisoned for expressing for what was on Facebook, whether the fundamental rights concerned was the European concept of fundamental rights or the fundamental rights of the Cairo Declaration, which subjects fundamental rights to Sharia law. Was this discussed, the actual definition of fundamental rights? And might I just add as supplementary, has the Commission said anything about the Pakistan minister who said he would kill anybody who found doing a biopic of Mohammed? As Pakistan is a nuclear power, I wonder what the Commission reaction is to this.
Okay, on the latter point, Michael will give you our position. On your first questions, because there were several questions, I think you were putting a number of events actually after the meeting of President Morsi and President Barroso, and therefore, it's obviously difficult in retrospect, to say anything further about that meeting and those discussions in light of events that then took place subsequently, or some of the events that you're referring to at least. I'll be happy to have a discussion with you of the meeting and debrief you in more detail. I mean, the President did have a press point with President Morsi, and I think perhaps you had the opportunity to attend that. I hope you did. Otherwise, there's an opportunity to revisit it. I'm happy to go into which angles on the point of fundamental rights were touched upon. That I will simply need to go back and pull out my files again. So I suggest we discuss that after the briefing. On the remarks of the Pakistani minister. Michael.
Well, of course, we deplore the call for a bounty to be placed on the head of the maker of the anti-Islamic film. And we're particularly concerned that this call should come from a member of the government, even if the Prime Minister himself has, of course, disassociated himself from this remark.
Very clear. Thank you very much, Michael. Other questions? Doesn't seem to be the case. Thanks very much.